Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another weather forecast here by Age of Weather Forecast. And it's going to be another update for the potential for upcoming windstorm Atticus for the Midwest as we are watching out for a transition to a positive PNA pattern, looking at for some very frequent troughs, negative tilted troughs that are going to be emerging across the Pacific Northwest and considerably moving at a fast pace deep into the crest in the heart of the United States. So we're watching out not only for some potential for some significant snow across the upper Midwest, possibly up to 2 feet of snow, but as well watching out for some widespread deep freeze across not only from the Rockies, but all the way down to the southeast here, basically from the end of this week towards basically the beginning of next week. But it's going to be mainly kind of transitioning towards this week as we're considering to see already this pattern develop across the Pacific Northwest, but transitioning towards the east here. So we have a lot to talk about in this video: snow, deep freeze, flooding, etc. So if you guys are interested in the video, I recommend you guys watch it as well as subscribe if you are new to the channel, as I do daily content and I want to have a lot more updates every single day on this snowstorm. But without further ado, let's get in the video. So right now we actually do already have some winter weather related alerts across the Sierra Mountains in the northwest, and this actually somewhat has to do with the setup for the Midwest by later this weekend here, looking at the 11th and the 12th, which will basically be uh, Thursday and Friday, and then into the weekend we're gonna watch out for maybe some lake effect snow, considering it's a November pattern. But I'll get a little bit later to that in the video. But right now we already have a few alerts, winter weather advisories in the purplish counties, and that's for much of the Sierras across the crest in the heart of Washington, and then of course going into Oregon. And right now we do actually have a winter weather advisory as well in place for Yellowstone, as we saw a ton of snow overnight last night. And then as we get later into the week here, specifically around Tuesday and Wednesday, we're gonna start seeing another wave, and that's gonna actually be the actual trough itself related towards the Midwest storm, because it's gonna be a basically cross-country low pressure, so it's gonna kind of develop across the Northwest and carry on like that. But that's gonna be the second trough. Right now, this is the first trough, so we do have a few warnings as well, winter warnings for North Central California, and then a few watches across the outside of the warnings there, and as well a few alerts considering winter weather advisories. And then we actually do as well have high wind warnings across California and Oregon, as well we do actually have as well high wind watches. So we're going to be watching out for basically a negative tilted trough, so it's not going to be really a zonal flow. So we're going to be seeing some pretty strong winds coming off the west coast, so we're going to be seeing some blizzard conditions in some of those higher elevations. And of course, as we get later in the week, we are likely to watch out for more winter weather advisories, warnings to be issued across the Rockies, and eventually for the Midwest. So let's now look at the pattern here for the next few days. So let's go towards the 18Z today, obviously. So there's going to be the trough. Basically, the actual mouth itself is going to be kind of ejecting towards British Columbia in the far, far northwest. It's kind of where it's going to be ejecting. So a lot of that really cold air and a lot of that advection moisture is going to actually center across British Columbia and far northern Washington. So we're going to be seeing some really, really intense snowfall, as well even some intense winds across portions of Washington and as well Oregon. It's going to be a little bit calmer today across the California areas. We do have an area of high pressure. It's going to be seeing some pretty calm winds, at least for today. But as we go later on here, we're going to start seeing another trough developing. We're going to be seeing a little bit stronger winds. But as we get towards 60 tomorrow, we're going to be seeing, of course, this actual low pressure going to be down here, a cold front actually to the north of it. And then we're going to be seeing a stationary boundary across the southwest United States. So we are going to be seeing that cold air actually all the way over here. That's where actual the actual temperature gradient of convergence line is. So all this area right here is going to be kind of centered across that deep freeze. So any really remaining precipitation tomorrow will actually mainly be snow in those higher elevations, including Yellowstone. That's going to be including Jackson, Wyoming, as well, including areas across Great Falls, Montana, into far northern Idaho. And those areas in the more lower elevations, we're going to be seeing some slight rain, possibly some sleet across areas near Gillette, Wyoming, Rapid City, South Dakota. But as we now get towards that second trough, here comes the actual main trough itself. I do that in quotations because it's going to be the main one. It's going to be the actual trough that's going to actually create the large Midwestern snowstorm. So this first one we're seeing right now, that's just going to kind of die off eventually in the central United States, as we see kind of a blocking high, kind of preventing anything going on across the Midwest. But here comes the second trough, and there you see the actual trough itself is going to be right there. It's going to be at this point really more towards open wave trough. But as we go towards really Wednesday, or actually as we go towards later Tuesday, 12 Tuesday, here comes the main trough. It's actually at this point going to become negative tilted because you look at the isobars and how they're kind of placed. It's kind of going like that instead of like this, which you'd see at an open wave trough. But we're actually looking at a negative tilted trough based on the isobar, so that's going to actually allow for those really strong winds, and that's why we do have those high wind warnings across these areas, because it's going to allow for that mouth and the ejection of that trough itself is going to bring those really strong winds off the coast, and it's always going to bring in some pretty nasty conditions. But by 12Z, of course, on Tuesday, really intense snowfall. There's the main trough itself, basically right here. There's a low pressure, part of an occluded front. And as we get towards Wednesday, this low pressure is going to rapidly make its way towards the Midwest. So it's going to be pretty rapid with a really intense cold front kind of attached to the southwestern part. So a lot of that cold there is going to stay to the west and northwest of the low pressure. And then we're going to kind of see, as we continue to branch off into Thursday, then we're going to see a warm front really attached to it. But at this point, we're going to be seeing another low pressure with an occluded front and then a warm front attached to that second stationary low pressure. And of course, the trough at this point is going to basically be centered across the Dakotas. And as we get towards Thursday, and this is going to be the actual main setup here. So this is a very typical November setup where you see a really strong steepening low pressure with basically this one's going to kind of be a little bit more towards open wave. And then you have the really intense cold front. This is going to be the main cold front. Like I said, there's going to be deep freeze all the way down to portions of the southeast eventually. By Thursday, we're going to be seeing a slight warm front. So we're going to be seeing kind of the main area, the warm sector is going to be basically right here. So we're going to watch out maybe for some slight severe weather. And then, of course, on the far western sides where that snow's actually going to be placed, because like I said, the cold front's going to really start to... The cold front is going to basically be right here, of course, at the front of that to the front of that low pressure. But of course, considering it's in a November setup, you're going to actually see this low pressure kind of back off. So it's actually going to throw off this whole setup, which is why a lot of that snow is going to basically be curling to the west of that low pressure and not towards the east, because we have a warm front toward the east. And since since in the very beginning of the week we're going to be seeing a high pressure right here, like I said, this is going to be Tuesday, a really strong high pressure, and another one right here. There's going to be really dry and warm air, but quickly by Thursday, since it's a very fast-moving trough, we're going to quickly see a cold front come out of nowhere. That's going to allow for extreme temperature gradient. That's going to allow for this whole setup to be really thrown off, and a lot of air is going to be above freezing, specifically to the east of the low pressure. So it's going to be more towards North Dakota, Minnesota, far northern Wisconsin. But as we get towards Friday, if this cold front really quickly moves towards the east, we are actually going to be seeing the low pressure stay in a really cold air. It's actually going to allow a chance for some Great Lake effect snow across next weekend. So let's quickly look at the actual setup for the Northwest. So obviously today we're going to be seeing the first trough that's going to be obviously ejecting in the British Columbia area. So British Columbia is going to get a lot of that snow, but the leftover moisture is going to be kind of towards far northern Washington and portions of Oregon. So that's where a lot of that snow is going to be centered across. And of course, still seeing that snow across Yellowstone across the day. But as we get towards tomorrow, it's going to be pretty dead. But there you see that second trough's coming in. You see a lot of that moisture now along that cold front and along that actual trough itself. So that's where you can see the difference between the first and second trough. The second trough's going to be a lot more to the south, and it's going to be going a lot deeper into the United States. So since this first cold front this first trough, it's still going to kind of be more towards a negative PNA pattern where you see it. This Alaskan ridge is not going to be east enough to the point where it actually pushes deep to the south. So it's actually going to be just ejecting across like areas, like it's going to be ejecting this first trough like this. So you're not going to be seeing really much moisture. But the second trough is going to kind of be ejecting this way, like far further south. And it's going to be a little bit less zonal flow than the first one. So you're going to be seeing a lot more precipitation centered across the United States compared towards British Columbia. So you see a lot of that moisture is actually going to be all across the western United States, while British Columbia really won't get too much. It could be maybe Vancouver and far southern. British Columbia, but this second trough is going to be a lot more significant, and that's actually why a snowstorm is going to be developing with the second one and not the first one, because the first one's obviously happening right now. It's going to be all across the higher elevation in the Sierras, but this second one's going to actually be in the lower elevations and very low elevations and far into the Midwest. So this is kind of a big difference. So this is the second trough. It's going to be actually entering around the 9th. Going to be seeing some really significant, heavy snow, possibly blizzard conditions across areas in north central California, as well as portions of Washington. And going to be seeing just an overall lot more precipitation. You can just tell the difference between this first trough and this second trough. A lot more precipitation, a lot more moisture convection. Going to be seeing really intense snowfall across the Rockies, across portions of Montana and Idaho, and as well. Still some leftover moisture across California. Going to be watching that first potential very significant flooding across San Francisco, Seattle, Salem, Portland, obviously, in that general vicinity. Of course, as we get towards the 10th, it's going to actually start tracking to a little bit toward the west. So obviously, it's kind of go like this. Low pressures are going to kind of dip to the south and then go up to the northeast. Obviously, eventually towards the Midwest. Let's now get a look at the actual snowfall totals all the way towards the 10th, and we're missing a ton of snow across specifically Washington and Olympia National Park, watching out for as much as 90 inches of snow. And you can just tell the difference. Let's go to the next 24 hours. The next 24 hours is going to be pretty dead just for basically Washington, because again, they're going to be closest to the actual ejection of the tip of that trough. So that's why we're not going to be seeing too much going on down here in Nevada. Not even too much going on in Yellowstone. Maybe a few additional inches or so. Maybe a little bit going on there in Idaho, Montana. But then look at this huge second trough. Absolutely just brings in a ton of snow, but a lot further south. You can kind of tell the difference because this second trough ejects far south. So it's actually going to allow for all that really cold air and moisture to actually meet all the way down here compared to up here in that first. It's going to be the first trough, it's going to be the second trough, and you can just tell the difference. Boom. More snow, actually, really heavy snow for Yosemite, South Lake Tahoe, Oregon, even scattered snow across Nevada, and a lot of additional snow for portions of Idaho outside Boise. So you can just tell the really big difference between these two troughs. So let's now get a look here at the 500 millibar, including the winds and the overall wind. The wind obviously in isobar meters. So here's the overall look at Tuesday. So Tuesday's where that kind of the very beginning, that second trough kind of comes in. But let's look at today though. Today you see it's kind of ejecting towards British Columbia. You can kind of tell it's going like this, a lot further toward the north than the second trough. There you see that really strong ridging across the central United States right now, and that ridge will eventually move to the southeast eventually by later the week, and there you see it kind of pushes a lot further to the east, and we're missing a really intense high pressure across the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to be seeing a lot of ridging across much of the very south United States and central United States and eastern United States. So they're going to be really warm and dry across this portion by Tuesday, but it's going to be just the northwest that's going to get all the action on Tuesday. And there you see the very beginning of that really intense ejection of that negative to the trough. You can kind of just tell it's negative tilted in the very beginning, just how intense those wind isobars are. You can kind of just tell, well, not wind isobars, but those wind meters are, and the directions they're really facing to the southwest with some really intense winds, extremely intense wind. You can just tell it by just how many lines there are on that. So there's basically 4, so it's indicating some really intense winds. And as we get towards the 10th, now we start to see this trough is starting to now dip a little bit further south here. You can kind of see that we're starting to see a dip in the jet stream here, intense ridging across the southeast. So now this ridge is going to be strengthening, but rapidly pushing toward the east. So eventually by the 12th, we're going to start seeing some cooler conditions across the north, or across the east United States. And there you see that really intense deepening low. Obviously, eventually started here, and now it's dipping like this. It's exactly what happened. And now we're seeing some really intense dip in the jet stream here. That's going to cause that ridge to kind of go far out in the United States. So no longer going to be actual in the southeast no more. And there you see that really intense, really steep low, guys. It's gonna be really intense. You can kind of tell it's gonna be kind of just really wrapping around like a typical November pattern. This is a very typical November pattern where you see kind of this low pressure spinning along the trough. That's actually gonna cause this low pressure to actually back off a little bit. You can kind of see it stalls back like that. And that's actually going to allow the chance for the snow to kind of eventually get in towards Wisconsin and Michigan and not just North Dakota and Minnesota. And then you see again really intense dip in the jet stream. That's going to allow for some cooler air by the weekend, by next weekend. We're actually technically this weekend for the southeast, and as well the eastern United States by the 13th and then the 14th as well. But you can kind of see the overall gradual development of that really intense trough and how it really steepens. And of course, it even backs up a little bit. That's actually going to allow for that remaining cooler air to possibly cause some lake effect snow, since the low pressure can be very slow moving and kind of backing off back and forth. There's a pretty good chance we can see some significant lake effect snow after the main event. Let's now get a quick look now at the 2-meter temperature anomaly. Like I said, really going to be really warm across Tuesday for a lot of the United States, but it's just the Northwest getting it's just the Northwest getting below average temperatures. Basically, it's just the far tips of the United States that are going to be seeing cooler air, because we're going to be seeing 2 high pressures, really intense winter out here, and a very intense winter across the eastern United States. Going to be seeing 2 high pressures, really calm winds, dry weather, sunny. Nothing crazy, but as we get towards the 11th, this is going to dramatically change as we now get a pretty large cold front behind this low pressure. But the thing is, you can kind of tell this cold front is going to be really lagging. It's going to really be lagging. We're going to be going basically from 25 degrees above average the day before in the Midwest to basically, at that point, going to be seeing from 25 degrees above average to around 15 to 12 degrees below average. And it's going to be the main reason why we're not going to be seeing extreme snow for Milwaukee, for Kalamazoo, Michigan, or in the areas of eastern Lake Michigan. It's going to kind of be sort of areas west of Lake Michigan, like Duluth, Twin Cities, Eau Claire, Marquette, that general vicinity. And it's because this cold front is going to be really lagging. We're going to be going from really warm. The surface is going to be very warm as well. The atmosphere is still going to be very warm across the eastern Midwest. Like this whole area, we see that really intense very intense high pressure still. But as that cold front really rapidly moves towards the east, it's not going to give enough time for the atmosphere to cool down. So the really only good place to see snow at that point is going to be across portions there of North Dakota and Minnesota, because that cold is actually going to be there on Thursday and Friday. And then the remaining cold there on Sunday and maybe Saturday is going to be possibly a chance for any of that remaining moisture will possibly become lake effect snow, but really deep freeze though for the southeast eventually from this cold front, this trough, by the next 6 or 7 days. Let's see what the GFS shows. Obviously, there you see that's in the Northwest. And here comes that second trough there. Here's the 10th. There you see that low pressure across the border of Idaho, or not Idaho, yeah, of North Dakota, Minnesota. But it's going to be the main low pressure right here, though. It's going to kind of, like I said, it's going to kind of dip like that, and then it's going to kind of rise. It's the typical November pattern. So as we get towards the 10th and the 11th, there you see, there's that low pressure. The warm front's going to kind of go up like that, allowing for just really rain across the lower Midwest. And then, of course, like I said, that cold front is kind of be centered just to the northwest. So that's why all that moisture just far northwest of the low pressures actually remain as snow. And then they're much actually from the actual low pressure itself, anywhere east or south is going to be just rain, because that west where that warm front is going to be. And of course, this cold front is going to take way too long to catch up to the low pressure that's moving so fast. But watch this, as this low pressure strengthens and it kind of backs up a little bit, it kind of backs back to the north. That's going to give time for that cold front to actually meet up. Basically, there you kind of see the cold front to be like that. And that's exactly now we're going to be seeing a more significant snowstorm now across much of Minnesota now. And we're going to start seeing a lot of that rain now across Wisconsin starting to convert to snow, because this low pressure not only strengthens to 988 millibars, but it backs. That's going to allow for this cold front to now become all the way towards the far east line. There you see that warm sector right there. So the potential small, significant for some very small severe weather across the lower who's your alley, but that's going to really allow, mainly going to affect the snowstorm. That's going to allow for really, really heavy snow, that cooler air and deep freeze to catch up. That's going to allow, of course, for a lot more accumulation and a lot more snow cover. And as this low pressure now backs up all the way back to Minnesota, kind of really backs up from going from Iowa all the way back to Minnesota. That's going to allow for all that rain to just continue to move eastward now to Georgia. But look at that huge gap. Look at that massive gap. So it went from a huge gap like that to then no gap at all. And that's exactly why, because that low pressure backs up, it pushes that rain to the east, and it pushes that snow back to the west, and it's going to allow for more and more snow across Minnesota, a portion there of Ontario, Canada, and to back to North Dakota, because typically in this type of pattern you see that kind of just push it this way. Like, it's not going to do anything really different. But continuing to November pattern, it's going to allow for this low pressure to back once again and give an opportunity for now North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota to get snow again. And then it backs up completely into the whole kind of just a counterclockwise flow. And that's going to allow, of course, for more and more snow. Even some snow for Iowa. Even Iowa can get snow from this. Now Wisconsin, Minnesota. I mean, this is a very weird but typical November pattern. And of course, like I said, as the low pressure slowly kind of continues to rotate clockwise because it's a November pattern, that's going to allow the chance for maybe some widespread deep freeze, and any remaining moisture is going to actually stay as lake effect snow. So we could very well see some snow for portions of Lansing, maybe Fort Wayne, maybe some snow for Cleveland, Erie, Pennsylvania, all across next weekend and even this weekend, because that cold air is going to be way into the southeast at this point. You can kind of see all the way down here. And of course, any remaining that moisture, it's going to be so cold, that air, that it's going to convert into lake effect snow. But of course, you can just tell if this were November, maybe December, January, this will be a pattern for a very large snowstorm from the Rockies to Maine. But considering the cold air is going to be lagging, we're going to go from really, really warm because of that high pressure to a rapid cold front. Everything in this system so rushed. If it weren't rushed, it would be really large. And I mean, we're talking about a huge snowstorm. But let's look at the overall snow accumulations. Still very significant across Minnesota. Watching out for a chance of over 2.5 feet across far northern Minnesota. And it's going to be kind of the bullseye right here because of how this kind of low pressure stalls. And since this low pressure is so strong, the low pressure that kind of go from here and stall back right over International Falls, Minnesota. So since that low pressure is so strong, and that area is just to the northwest of the low pressure, this is the absolute perfect place to get that snow, because it's at the strongest part of that low pressure, allowing for the heaviest precipitation rate, and as well as going to be to the northwest, allowing for that cold air. And then, of course, if you go by that theory, this would be the best area for really heavy rain because it's in the northeast in that really strong low pressure. But of course, since this moisture kind of goes all the way to the east because it backs up, technically, it's a really, really weird pattern to say, but really good snow for North Dakota, Minnesota, and even possibly some slight accumulation down to Nebraska, Iowa, and even as well getting close to Madison, Wisconsin. So we're going to have to watch out for these areas because this location is still very, very all over the place, but we're starting to get a better idea.